Most jobs ever created by a new U.S.-based project funded by a foreign company. That was the splashy promise in 2017 when former President Donald Trump and former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker heralded a massive new factory in southern Wisconsin to be built by Taiwan-based electronics manufacturer Foxconn.
This is a great day for America. It is a great day for Wisconsin, and it's a great day for Foxconn. Today, we're announcing the single largest economic development project in the history of the state of Wisconsin and one of the largest in the history of this country.
But was that all a mirage? A new book argues those big promises have come up way short. The book is called Foxconned: Imaginary Jobs, Bulldozed Homes, and the Sacking of Local Government. And joining us now is the author of Foxconned, journalist Lawrence Tabak. Lawrence Tabak, thanks for joining us. Remind us who Foxconn is and what they had vowed to build in southeastern Wisconsin.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Foxconn is most famous for its construction of electronic devices, mostly in China, the iPhone being the most prominent of those objects. They, more lately in their history, got into the business of manufacturing large screen TVs, flat screens. And they proposed that they would bring that technology to the United States and to Wisconsin and build a $10 billion plant that would build the largest TV sets that you could imagine.
I remember at that time, the governor of Wisconsin had promised up to $3 billion in state tax incentives for creating all these jobs. They had promised thousands of jobs. Where is that project actually at today?
Well, the incentives that the state promised were protected in a sense by linkage to job creation. So that money has not been transferred. However, the local communities, Racine County and Mount Pleasant, village of 26,000, went in whole hog on the infrastructure spending, and they've spent at least $500 million on roads, water infrastructure, buying the property which they've deeded to Foxconn. And what's there is rather disappointing. About 5% of their promised square footage, and only a tiny fraction, maybe a few hundred jobs that have been created since that project was announced 4 years ago.
And a big cost here, you mentioned that those promised tax incentives haven't all been paid out, but a lot of money for infrastructure has. And so many folks lost their homes due to eminent domain, or they lost their neighbors. Tell us about some of the personal stories you heard about folks that were forced to give up their dwelling places.
Well, this is really the most heartbreaking part of the story. First of all, that area, which I drove through in October of 2017, it's a beautiful area. I mean, it's flat area with a lot of family farms growing not only cash crops, but produce. And scattered along those country roads were little homesteads, 1 to 5 acre homes, beautifully maintained and landscaped. And about 75 of those homes were given a letter in October of 2017 saying that they would be losing their homes through eminent domain. And the family farms that are in there have been also been transferred under a great deal of stress and perhaps even coercion to sell their land, even though some of it had been in families for generations.
And we remember that the former governor, the former president really touted this project as a massive investment. And as your book argues, it has not come to fruition. Was public input taken into consideration here when civic leaders were making these decisions?
The major decisions were done behind closed doors, and they were often top down. People that I spoke to, the most common metaphor that they used was getting hit by a train. This thing came into the local community with so much momentum and so much top-down power involved that it was just swept away. There were no hearings, there were no referendum. This was just dropped on the local community
There were other governors of other states that soured on this deal, that kind of saw the writing on the wall. From your reporting, was this decision purely about politics more than it was the realities of economics?
Well, certainly it was politics over economics. Keep in mind that this was actually after Walker's attempt to get the nomination for the Republican candidate for presidency. And his approval ratings in Wisconsin at the time were quite low. He was looking at an election which was going to be challenging. And I'm sure he thought that this was going to be really the event that would put him over the top, that would restore his reputation. And he was determined to make this happen in Wisconsin, even though there were other states that were bidding plenty of money.
These bidding wars happen all the time. Chicago tried to bid for Amazon's headquarters, and you've written about some of these bidding wars in your book. What have you found when you analyze these situations?
This isn't a novel discovery for me. Academics have been pointing to this for decades, and that is that the net sum game of Ohio bidding against Illinois, bidding against Wisconsin is zero. If a factory is going to be built or if a headquarters is going to be located, it will get done regardless of how much incentive money is involved. It's just a case study here with Foxconn of how they played one state against another state to crank up the value of their project to the point where Wisconsin was willing to spend billions of dollars for the number of jobs that really would have never paid back that upfront expense.
And last question for you. Tell us what the future of that site is. Again, it's not going to materialize into what they promised, thousands of high-paying jobs or manufacturing jobs. So what is the likeliest outcome?
Well, first of all, Foxconn owns 1,000 acres of Wisconsin property. What they do with it is unknown. But they not only own property, but they have a pipeline to Lake Michigan water, one of the last great resources of clean water in the world. And the rest of the property, which is now about 3,900 acres, is basically an empty industrial park waiting for the civic leaders to potentially develop it over time.
All right, the cautionary tale just over the Illinois border in southeastern Wisconsin. And our thanks to author Lawrence Tabak. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Again, the new book is Foxconned, Imaginary Jobs, Bulldozed Homes, and the Sacking of Local Government. You can find an excerpt on our website.